Today's video is going to kick off a new prediction series where we're going to be predicting the final standings of all NHL divisions for the regular season, and we're kicking things off with the Eastern Conference Atlantic Division, and that's coming up next. So welcome back here to Top Shelf Hockey. As I mentioned, we're kicking off a prediction series as we're really close to the start of the NHL season now. I'm going to be releasing a video for each division in the NHL, releasing my predictions for how these teams are going to finish during the regular season, and follow that up with a video outlining which teams I believe will make the playoffs and how the playoffs are going to go, and make my really early prediction for a Stanley Cup winner for the 2019-2020 NHL season. So of course, today we're kicking things off with the 8 teams in the Atlantic Division. I'm going to start at the bottom and work my way up to the top. Of course, as always, we'll know your thoughts and your opinions down in the comment section, so let me know how you have these teams finishing, and feel free to comment on what you think of my selections. Starting things off in the basement again this year, we have the Ottawa Senators. Now, right now, the Ottawa Senators are going through a rebuild, a major youth movement, and even though I do feel they will be a better team than last year, they certainly have a little bit more stability. They just locked up their star defenseman Thomas Chabot to an 8-year extension, which is a really big positive for the franchise. They see some of the younger players sticking around, committing to the franchise, and the franchise committing to them for some long-term stability. We saw Colin White get signed to a 6-year contract earlier in the offseason as well. So certainly a positive sign. They have a lot of strong young talent in Ottawa. It's just going to take them a little bit more time to build themselves up to getting back to being a more respectable competitive team who can battle for a playoff spot. But when you have guys like Chabot and White, and you throw in other players like Drake Batherson, Eric Brandstrom, and a lot of the young goaltenders and other players they have here, they have a very, very bright future. I think the sky will be the limit in a few years' time down the road if all these kids realize their full potential. But for right now, the Ottawa Senators are going to have another year in the Atlantic Division basement, near the basement of the NHL. But the good news is this year they have their first round selection at the 2020 NHL Draft, which is expected to be a very deep draft and could prove to land them another star player for their future. Next up in 7th place, we have the Detroit Red Wings. So a lot like Ottawa, going through a little bit of a youth movement here, going through a bit of a rebuild after a long stretch of a lot of playoff success and many years consecutively of making the playoffs. Of course, Steve Yzerman's recently taking over as general manager, and it's kind of continuing what was going on under Ken Holland in Detroit. Now, of course, Detroit, like I said, they have some young talent as well that are fun to watch, like Dylan Larkin, Anthony Mantha, but there's certainly a lot of concerns still on this team. The goaltending tandem is certainly not a younger one as well, with Howard and Bernier. Not really sure how that's going to go this year. Another year older for both of them, so there certainly are some concerns there. The Red Wings, like the Senators, do have some young promising talent, like I mentioned as well. Some other guys coming up that should hopefully have better years, like Philip Zadina, Michael Rasmussen. Hopefully Svechnikov can get things going and stay healthy and start to show his NHL potential as well. I do see the Red Wings likely finishing a little bit ahead of the Senators, but again near the basement, and really not a whole lot of progress compared to last year. Next up in 6th place, we have the Buffalo Sabres. Now, I know last year there was a lot of optimism in Buffalo, and really I was hoping by now that I'd be able to predict it for them to finish a little bit higher in the standings as well, because it feels like they've been rebuilding forever. They did have some additions throughout the offseason as well, adding some pretty decent depth, including Marcus Johansson and Jimmy Vesey. They made some additions on the blue line, including guys like Colin Miller and Brandon Montour. I still have some concerns about their goaltending with Hutton and Allmark. I'm just not sure they're really capable of getting a whole lot of W's for this team. Of course, they locked up Jeff Skinner to a mega contract as well. So Skinner and Eichel will lead the team offensively, along with guys like Sam Reinhart up front. I'm just not sure that they're really deep enough and strong enough defensively and in the net to really compete with all the other teams that are ahead of them on this list, and are going to likely finish ahead of them in the NHL standings in the Atlantic Division here. Now, I know last year they had a terrific beginning to the year. They had a really strong start, and then things really tailed off and really got ugly here to finish out the NHL season, led to Phil Housley being let go as head coach. Of course, they have a new head coach down with Ralph Kruger. Defensively as well, they're starting the year with Brandon Montour likely being injured, so that's not a good start as well. There's still a lot of talk about Rasmus Ristolainen. Now, of course, I'm recording this video probably about a week before it's released, so it is possible he could end up being traded if he has been traded by the time this is published, so certainly disregard that and move on here. But Rasmus Ristolainen is another big question mark for the Sabres as well. Can he improve his play? Will he be traded? I just don't have a lot of confidence right now in this Sabres group to be able to finish stronger than a lot of the other teams that had them on this list. And even though they've added to their depth this year, I still think they have a ways to go to move up in the standings. Next up in fifth place, I've got the Florida Panthers. Now, going into this offseason, I knew the Florida Panthers were going to be big-time players, and I really thought I'd be able to put them higher on this list as well. I just have a hard time having confidence in what this team is doing, just because there's been so many times over the years that the Panthers are going to be better. They've made all these moves, and they're going to be better. They're going to compete. They're going to be a playoff team. They're going to be a contender, and then yet it never seems to happen. So for me, I need seeing as believing here. Of course, they put out a mega contract to goaltender Sergei Bobrovsky. Of course, they spent a lot of money bringing in a very experienced and one of the best head coaches around in Joel Quenneville, which is going to help quite a bit as well. They added some more depth to their forward position by bringing in guys like Brett Connolly, Nola Cherry, Anton Strawman on the blue line. So overall, on paper, this team does look pretty solid. Their top six is really, really good when you get guys like Huberdeau and Barkov and Mike Hoffman. Like, they have the ability to put the puck in the net. They certainly have some stronger goaltending. The blue line might be a little better this year. So there is a lot of reason for optimism, and I could be completely wrong, and the Panthers very well might move up further on this list. But when you have the other teams ahead of them that obviously you've narrowed down who I have ranked in the top four here, it just makes it hard for me to put them ahead of them right now without seeing some more results. On paper, they do look better. I've seen this story too many times before and had the Panthers end up disappointing. So for me, before I can make a prediction that they're going to go up higher in the standings, I need to see a little bit more results on the ice. Next up in fourth place, I have the Montreal Canadiens. Now, like I said with the Florida Panthers, Montreal and Florida were two teams I really kind of struggled with determining who I thought would finish in what position. Now, of course, as we know, Montreal just barely missed the playoffs last year, and I have them in the same boat here in fourth place in their division. Although the playoff picture might look a little bit different, you're going to want to stay tuned for the playoff prediction video coming here in a couple days' time. But the Montreal Canadiens are certainly a team that didn't do a ton of moves during the offseason. They did improve their blue line here a little bit by adding UFA defenseman Ben Sherratt. They've also added another more experienced backup goaltender in Keith Kincaid, who's looked pretty solid so far during the preseason as well. So hopefully Kincaid can spell off Price, and Price can continue his strong play that he did last year, and goaltending can remain solid. If the blue line can get a little bit better with Ben Sherratt, and then of course up front, I do see guys like Jesperi Kotkaniemi taking some more steps forward, and some other younger players hopefully having a pretty solid impact, like Ryan Poehling and possibly Nick Suzuki as well. I do think the Montreal Canadiens very well could end up scoring themselves into a playoff position for the coming year, moving up in the standings. But overall, really, like I said, they were so close last year, and hopefully their young players can take another step forward. My only concern with them not going up higher and maybe even being in a battle with Florida for that middle part of the division is that they had a lot of guys last year put up career numbers like Max Domi, Thomas Tatar, Brendan Gallagher, and when you have that many players hitting career highs all at the same time, it's really difficult to duplicate, and oftentimes you do see a little bit of regression. And even though things were really close to them being a playoff team and going up higher in the standings, you could also say the same thing, that if there is some regression, they very well could be really close to taking a step back as well. So I do have Montreal finishing ahead of Florida. I do think they're going to be a very fun team to watch this year. I'm very curious to see how many of their young players make out and see how many steps forward they can take. And I do have the Habs finishing in fourth place, but it's going to be a really tight battle amongst the middle part of that division. Next up in the Atlantic Division, third place, I have the Toronto Maple Leafs. Now, with the moves that the Maple Leafs have made throughout this offseason, I'm not 100% convinced that they are a better team. Now, they had to make some different moves in order to move around the salary cap, get Mitch Marner signed. Obviously, that was a mega contract. They now have a lot of money invested in their top three forwards between Austin Matthews, John Tavares, and Mitch Marner. Of course, William Nylander is the fourth highest paid forward, just shy of $7 million. Really, it's a lot of money, really in a very forward-heavy group. And even though their blue line on paper looks better to produce even more offense this year, I'm really not convinced that it's a whole lot better defensively. Now, of course, they had some guys move on, like Ron Hainsey through free agency. They traded Nikita Zaitsev, and they were able to bring in some guys like Tyson Barrie, who's going to be a huge addition to that blue line from the offensive side of the game. Not really sure Tyson Barrie's got a lot of accolades for being a strong defensive player. He's more of an offensive power play quarterback type of guy who can generate a lot of offense once he brings the puck up the ice. So really, from a defensive perspective, I'm not going to say that Tyson Barrie is really going to make them that much better. But when you have Barrie and Riley running your power plays, then that's certainly going to create a lot of offense. And there's going to be a lot of nights like last year, maybe even more so than before, that the Toronto Maple Leafs will be able to score their way to victory, even though they might have some deficiencies on the defensive side of the game. They had some pretty strong goaltending with Freddie Anderson, but there's still a big question mark on the backup position and how much relief he's going to be able to get to be properly rested. rested, and with the whole load management that teams are doing now, especially with goaltenders. And back to the blue line, when you take a look at the rest of the guys like Cody Ceci, he struggled mightily in Ottawa the last couple of years. He's really not strong at all defensively. You throw Ben Harper in the mix if he's still going to get some NHL time. Really, again, not the strongest defensively. When you look at the other guys, then you get some young guys like Sandin and Marinson, Hall. It's not really clear as I record this video, at least, what defensemen they're going to have as their starting 6 or 7 guys at the NHL level. Overall, I think their blue line will be able to generate even more offense than before. I'm just not convinced that they're better defensively, which was a major weakness when we get deeper into the season and into the playoffs. I think this team is going to score their way to victory a lot. They're incredibly offensive. Really, if you take a look at the forward group as well, you take away Nazem Kadri, you put in Alex Kerfoot. Kerfoot's a decent player, but I like Kadri better myself. So overall, I don't really see the forward group being that much deeper. They have a lot of guys that are battling for those bottom 6 roles as I record this video as well. Not quite clear who the fourth line is going to be, but it's looking like probably a combination of maybe Moore, Spezza, Gauthier. There's some other guys in the mix as well. So really, overall, I like the Leafs. I think they're going to be a very fun team to watch. I do see them having a very successful year, but they also had a very successful year last year, and I'm just not convinced that they're stronger defensively. So I do think they're still going to be prone to a few more losses than we might think, and I think they're going to be able to score their way to a lot of victories, but I'm just not sure that they're really going to be any stronger overall and work their way up into being a top 1 or 2 teams in this division for the coming season. Next up in second place, I have the Boston Bruins. Now, the Boston Bruins are a team like the Maple Leafs. Of course, those 2 teams have been battling in the playoffs the last number of years, and really, they're a very deep team as well, very strong team. I just like their forward group a little bit better than Toronto's overall, just because they are a better balanced, deeper forward group, in my opinion. Now, some of the higher-end talent in Toronto is certainly a little bit more offensively, but, Bergeron and Marchand and Pasternak are certainly no slouches in that regard. You get other guys like David Krejci had a really good year last year. Jake DeBrusk is continuing to improve his play as well. So overall, I really like the Bruins' top 6. Charlie Coyle was a nice fit after he was acquired from Minnesota last year as well. And overall, like I said, this Bruins team is pretty deep. I really like the goaltending tandem of Rask and Halak. They had a really strong year last year. Rask had a really solid playoffs. Halak almost outperformed him during the regular year, but was a more than capable backup when called upon. So that's really good as well. Their blue line certainly has lots of experience. They will be starting the year with some injuries. Of course, Chair is still in the mix, another year older, but still able to contribute. They get Carlo and McAvoy under new contracts as well for the next little while, so that's certainly good news as well. So overall, I just think this Boston Bruins team is not going to be ahead of Toronto by a whole lot. I think it's going to be another dogfight right to the finish here, and they're not going to finish ahead of the Leafs by a whole heck of a lot. I just think that they're a little bit better balanced team. They have a little bit more longer-term experience, and I just think that they're going to finish ahead of Toronto just by a little bit. So, of course, by process of elimination, you probably figured out by now, first place is the Tampa Bay Lightning. Now, they've been in first place in this division for the last number of years. They are, in my opinion, the top team in the Eastern Conference on paper. They are incredibly strong. They will be without Braden Point, who just signed a 3-year deal, probably for about the first month of the season as he's recovering from hip surgery. So that's certainly not going to help matters. They did lose JT Miller, who they had to give up at a cost-cutting measure earlier through the offseason as well. So they are going to be a little bit weaker at the forward position to start the year, but long term, I think they're going to be in just fine shape. They added a stronger backup goaltender, Curtis McElhinney, who's more than capable of giving Andrei Vasilevsky more than ample time off to make sure he's well rested for the playoffs. So that's certainly a great move by the Lightning to upgrade that position. So they have one of the stronger goaltending tandems in the NHL. They already had a pretty solid blue line, and they added Luke Schenn and Kevin Shattenkirk, some veteran guys there. I think Shattenkirk will be able to help on the power play a lower role than he was given with New York, and hopefully get his career back on track. So overall, that blue line's pretty solid. They added a Stanley Cup winner in Patrick Maroon to the forward group, who's certainly going to be able to provide, like he did in St. Louis, that physical type of play, probably play a third to fourth line role, but also bring that pedigree of winning. He obviously knows what it's like to go through the battles to win the Stanley Cup last year, which many of the guys on the Lightning can't say that they've had the experience to do yet. So hopefully adding that experience will certainly be a big help. But the Tampa Bay Lightning, in my opinion, are just too strong. They are so good on paper. They're going to execute another really solid regular season. The only big question mark really is, can they get it done in the playoffs? That's been their kryptonite so far over the last number of years. This team was built to win. They've done an excellent job of putting this team together. They just need to get it done in the playoffs, which is a story for another day. But I do see the Tampa Bay Lightning once again finishing in in first place and locking up probably first place in the Eastern Conference as well. So as I mentioned at the beginning of the video, I want to know what your thoughts are on my predictions, so certainly leave me some comments and let me know as well, what would your predictions be? How do you have these teams finishing in the Atlantic Division from 1st down to 8th? Let me know what you think and we'll continue the conversation down in the comment section. If you're new to the channel, consider subscribing and turning on your notifications so you don't miss any future content. Stay tuned for the other 3 division prediction videos coming here soon, and also stay tuned for the Stanley Cup playoff prediction video coming shortly after that as well. Thank you very much for watching, everybody, and I will catch you next time.